Welcome everyone to Pathways Through the Orchard. Tonight is Parshat Chayei Sarah, and we have three different insights that we're going to be sharing. And we're going to start with a connection between Sarah and Chava, Eve. In this week's Parsha, and it's called after Chayei Sarah, after our matriarch Sarah, and it begins with her death. I write about it extensively in Orchard of Delights and Fruits of the Orchard. Here, I want to focus on the connection between Sarah and Chava. So in Parshat Bereshit, in this series of Pathways Through the Orchard, we talked about Chava's name, that at first she's just called Isha, the woman. When she was separated from Adam, she wasn't addressed by a name. After they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, so Adam gives her a name, and he calls her Chava, and he gives an explanation because she's Aim Kol Chai. She's the mother of all living. And so we compared the name Chava to Chaya. Many women, Jewish women, are called Chava, and many are called Chaya. And Chaya comes from the word living, Aim Kol Chai. But he called her Chava. And in Parsha Bereshit, we discussed at length that the root of the word Chava is cognate with the word Chavaya. Chavaya means experience and expression, depending on its usage, including in modern Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, an experience is called a Chavaya, which is coming from the root Chava. So there we discussed in Parsha Bereshit some of the meanings of that. We're going to go a little bit deeper into this. But we also see that in Aramaic, one of the Aramaic translations for Nachash is Chivya, which is spelled almost exactly like Chava. Chet, Vav, Yud, Aleph. So here we see that Aramaic is a sister language to Hebrew. The great translator into Aramaic, Onkelos, appears in every printed Chumash. And many times when we want to understand what is the simple understanding of a verse, we look at the Aramaic, because his is not just a translation. It's a translation that clarifies the actual meaning of different words. So one of the names in Aramaic, also in the Zohar, is Chivya, is the snake. Now, obviously, there's a deep connection between Chava and the snake of Gan Eden. It was a snake who got convinced Chava to eat from the tree. And therefore, there's just an obvious connection. And when God will use the word curses in parentheses, because really the snake, Chava, and Adam, their curse was really just a result of their own actions. It was the consequences of their actions. And this is a very, very important statement, because throughout the Torah, especially in the book of Devarim, there is the theme of blessings and curses. But if you really look at it deeply, all of the curses in the Torah is just a revelation or manifestation of a mida keneged mida, a measure for a measure, the consequences of people's actions. So here, the fact that in Aramaic, one of the names of the snake, the Nachash, is Chivia, which is basically the same root as Chava. And just to add here a little bit, that how did the snake convince Chava? Well, it's in the text. It's not a midrash. And he says, the reason God doesn't want you to eat from the tree, because when you eat from the tree, you'll be like God, to know the difference between good and evil. So this is very enticing, because if you read the story without any commentary, especially the oral tradition, so Eve comes out as the bad person, Adam and Chava, but the Kotzker Rebbe once said, would it be that on Yom Kippur, I could reach 1,000th of the level of Chava when she ate from the tree? Now, obviously, he didn't condone her doing against God's will, but she, however we want to put it, she was convinced or tricked or enticed by the idea of being like God. And Reb Shlomo once said, how come the snake came to Chava and not to Adam first? Why didn't he try to convince Adam? Okay, so there's a lot of underlying sexual innuendos here between the snake and what it desired. But Reb Shlomo said, on a whole different plane, is that the snake went to Chava because when he said, you'll be like God, because there's something about women that, in a sense, is closer to God than men, and that is the ability to give birth. Now, men can give birth to ideas, can give birth to projects. A man obviously contributes to the birth of a child, but only a woman can actually carry a child to full term and give birth to a child. And this is, in a sense, one of the most godlike actions that anyone can do. And so that's why the snake, this is what Reb Shlomo said, went to Chava with this enticement, you'll be like God, because there's something about womanhood and their not just ability to give birth, but their whole physical and mental and emotional and spiritual makeup, that the snake knew that he would have a better customer with Chava than he would with Adam. So why am I talking about all of this with Chava? This is the parsha of Chayei Sarah. What's the connection? So the connection is, according to the Arizal, Sarah is a Gilgul, a reincarnation of Chava. And so there's a very, very deep connection between Sarah and Chava. And that's what we're going to look at here. So the first thing is, where was Sarah buried? Marat HaMachpelah, in Hebron. And the Midrash tells us, why did Adam choose that place to bury Sarah? So the Midrash goes that when the three angels came to announce that Avram and Sarah would in fact have a child in their elderly years, and it would be somewhat miraculous because physically neither Avram or Sarah apparently were physically able to have children. So the angels come, and we hear in the text how Avram ran to the flock, to the cattle, to prepare a meal for them. And so the Midrash says that he was in Hebron and he's kind of chasing after a cow, and the cow goes into a cave. He follows the cow into the cave, and he, let's say, turns around a corner, and he's confronted with a blast of light. He's like almost blinded by a blast of light. And according to tradition, he found the burial place of Adam and Chava. And that's why he chose, that's the place that Sarah should be buried. Avram is a Gilgul of Adam. Sarah is a Gilgul, a reincarnation of Chava. And the name of the place where they're buried is actually called Kiryat Arba, Hebron. First, it's called Kiryat Arba, the city of four, and then it's called Hebron. Why is it called the city of four? Because there are four pairs that would be buried there. Who are the four pairs? Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov and Leah, but the first ones were Adam and Chava. So here already we see a very deep connection between Chava and Sarah. So going back to this idea that Chava, as Aim Kol Chai, she's called the mother of all living. And in truth, all human beings come from Adam and Chava. But all Jews come from Avram and Sarah. So just like Chava is called the mother of all living, Sarah is called the mother of all Jews, of the Jewish people, and every convert also. We're told that all the years that Avram and Sarah were together in marital union, well, they didn't all those years until Yitzchak produce physical offspring, but we're told that spiritually they were giving birth to all future converts. So that's an awesome idea, that they were giving birth to all future converts. And that's why when someone converts, so they are called Ben Avraham or Bat Avram. But when you pray for a healing, we always pray in the mother's name. And so every convert is called also the son of Sarah. So Avram and Sarah are the father and mother. That's what we call them, Avram Avinu. Avram, our father. Yitzchak, our father. And Sarah Imenu. Sarah, our mother. So Rav Ginsburg explains something very, very deep about male and female, masculine and feminine, in the name Adam. So we know that when Adam was first created, he was created male and female. And then God separated the masculine side from the feminine side, or the opposite. Actually, he separated the feminine side from the masculine side. And so we're told that in the name Adam, there's also a separation of sorts, that we read the word according to their syllables, that the Aleph of Adam represents the neshama, the soul, the spiritual component, and the Dam, which also means blood, represents the body. So Adam is a composite of soul and body. But we also know that Adam was a composite of masculine and feminine. So Rav Ginsburg explains in parallel, in correspondence to the word chashmal. Chashmal in modern Hebrew means electricity. It's a word that only appears 3 times in the book of Ezekiel, Yechezkel, in what's called the Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot, where Ezekiel explains his vision. The first chapter of Ezekiel is a description of this vision that he has. And even though the term Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot, are not mentioned in the vision became known as the workings of the chariot. And in it, he describes this energy that he sees that he calls chashmal. Now, there wasn't electricity then. So he saw this illuminated energy called chashmal. Our sages explain that the word chashmal also can be broken down by their syllable. Chash means silent. Mal means speaking. So this is what's called the speaking silence, or in the words of Simon and Garfunkel, the sounds of silence. Chashmal, a silent voice. So Rav Ginsburg takes this idea and he compares it to the name Adam, where the word dam of Adam, so he said it means blood, but it also means something else. Dam is from the same root is dome, which means silent. Where do we see this word? After the 2 sons of Aaron bring an offering on the day that the tabernacle, the Mishkan, is dedicated, and they weren't commanded to bring this. And in the process, their souls left their bodies and they died. And when Aaron was informed of this, so the Torah says, Vayidom Aharon. Aaron was silent. He was silent. That was, he had no other response in the moment, in the moment. And actually, I just heard an amazing Torah that's connected to this, and it's connected to the current situation in Israel. And I don't remember which Chabad representative it was. It was a video I saw in Hebrew. It was one of the Chabad shlichim here in Israel. And he was talking about current events, and he reminded us that many years ago, I don't remember the exact time, but there was a terrorist attack in Kfar Chabad. And many people were killed, including a number of young students. And it was quite shocking at the time. And so they wrote back to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, like, how do we relate to this? Like, what are we supposed to think about this? And it actually took him a few days to respond. And when he did, the message was 2 words, Vayidom Aharon. In other words, the Rebbe didn't try to come up with some we'll call it fancy or reason or justification. It was just Vayidom Aharon, later he sent many messages forward, like it is what it is, but it should in no way deflect our purpose. And he urged them to continue building and expanding. And so that's really the situation we're in now. And it's known that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was very, very against anyone trying to bring reasons why the Holocaust happened. Many people have attempted, and probably with good intentions, we'll give the benefit of the doubt, to come up with reasons. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe was, we don't even go there. We don't go there. We just have to go forward. It's a mystery that is beyond our comprehension. Anyways, I went off the track a little bit, but it's always good to relate to what's happening. So Rav Ginsburg explained that the Aleph of Adam it means expression. And the Dam of Adam is silence. And he said this corresponds to Chashmal. But just like Chash means silent, the Aleph of Adam is silent. And just like Mal means to speak, so the Dam is the silence. But it will notice it's reversed orders. In Chashmal, it's first silent and then speaking. That is ideally how we should always speak, is by silently thinking first, thinking before we speak. Halavai, we would always do that. Some of us, obviously, at different times regret that we speak before we think. So that's, in a way, the natural flow. And here we actually have it reversed, but he explains that the speaking is the feminine and the silent is the masculine. And this we see in a very, very famous book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And bottom line in this book, which it had made some really good points, is it's men by nature. Now, we're not talking about all men, and we're not talking about in every situation. We can't make such huge generalizations. But many times in relationships, men are more reluctant to express their feelings and to express what's on their mind, where women are much more expressive. And so in the book, it says very rightfully so that when between a couple, let's say there's some problem, doesn't even mean it's between the couple. There's just some problem that has to be dealt with. So the natural tendency of the masculine is, let's solve the problem. We have a problem, let's solve it. Where women also want to solve problems, but in great measure, women want to be heard. The first thing is they want to express themselves and they want to be heard. Then we'll get to solving the problem. So here we see it in this idea of Adam and Chava, in male and female. And we see it very much in the relationship of Avram and Sarah also. And here again, we'll make a generalization. But even though they were equal, because we're told explicitly that Avram was turning on all the men, and Sarah was turning on all the women. So they both were expressing. But when the angels came and they said, "Where is your wife?" He said, "She's in the tent." In other words, here we have these reversals. This is what's called how we interchange different energies, inter-inclusion. That Sarah's in the tent, which implies silence, and Avram's the expressive one. But when it comes time to listen, what to do with Hagar and Yishmael, so God says, everything that Sarah says, listen to her voice. You have to listen to her. So here we see a lot of what's called inter-inclusion between silence and speech, masculine and feminine. And we see it a lot in the relationship of Avram and Sarah. So we're told that the letter Hey is a letter of expression. So when Avram becomes Avraham, so the letter Hey is added to his name. A letter isn't taken away though. A letter is added. But with Sarah, her original name was Sarai, and a Yud is taken away, and she gets a Hey. And we're told in general, Yud is a more of a masculine energy, and the Hey is a more of a feminine energy. And so we're told that one of the problems that Sarah had with giving birth is that she had an overabundance of male energy, because every person, all of us, have both components. That is the secret of understanding that Adam and Chava were one being, masculine and feminine together. And even when they're separated, every male retains a female component, and every female still has a male component. So I want to share another thing from Reb Shlomo about Sarah and Chava. So he said an amazing thing, that Chava ate from the tree. And then the text tells us that she gave to Adam, and he also ate from the tree. But we're not told in the text, how did she convince him? What did she say to him in order to get him to eat also? And so in all of these cases, there's many, many different ideas that are shared in the Midrash, in the Gemara, in Chassidut. So Rav Shlomo, I don't remember the source, but he shares the following idea, is that if you remember that God said, when you eat from the tree, on that day you shall surely die. Now it turns out that Adam and Chava didn't die on that day, but they brought death into the world. And eventually they died, and we all die. And so she eats from the tree, and now the realization, now that she knows the difference between good and evil, and she has a different consciousness now, she understands that she's going to die. And so Reb Shlomo says she went to Adam and told him what happened, and said, I'm really afraid of dying, especially by myself. And Adam says, I'll eat also, and we'll share death together. We'll both die. So that's why we have this idea that mostly Chava brought death into the world. And so she brought death into the world, and she asked someone else to die for her. Now we go to Sarah. We're told in the Midrash that the death of Sarah happens right after the incident of the Akedah. And again, there are different versions of what she was told. In other words, when Avram took Yitzchak, he didn't consult with Sarah first, and she didn't even know. And so when she heard that Avram had taken Yitzchak, so some versions are he took him to slaughter Yitzchak as an offering. And one version actually says that in the end he wasn't taken as an offering, and she interpreted that meant he wasn't good enough for the offering. However we learn it, and there are other opinions also, she died on the spot. When she heard about her son being brought as an offering, she died. And Reb Shlomo says, what did she say as she was dying? She was saying, God, let me die instead. Don't let my son die. Let me die instead. So Reb Shlomo says an amazing thing. He said, Chava asked someone else to die, in a sense, for her. Sarah makes the rectification, the tikkun, by offering to die for someone else. She reverses it. And if we think about it, it's like really an awesome idea that Reb Shlomo was sharing. I'm sorry, but I don't know the exact source. But here, this is one of the tikkunim that Sarah is doing for Chava. And as I said before, Avram and Sarah are reincarnations of Adam and Chava, and they begin the process of fixing and healing the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We're still trying to fix it, but they began the process. Now, I just want to bring one more idea. And this is an idea in the Gemara that one time Rebbe Akiva was teaching a yeshiva full of students. And he notices they're, for whatever reason, they're like all falling asleep. He sees that he's like lost them, or they're just too tired or whatever. And so the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva like pulls like a rabbit out of his hat and says, just like out of the blue, do you know why Achashverosh ruled over 127 provinces? Is because our mother Sarah lived for 127 years. And the Gemara says that when the students heard like such a idea, they like all like woke up and like, whoa, Rabbi Akiva, what are you saying? What's the connection between Achashverosh ruling over 127 provinces? That's how the Megillat Esther begins. Way before Esther is introduced to the story, that he ruled over 127 provinces. So what is the connection? What is the connection? And so we see that eventually Esther became queen, and therefore she also ruled over 127 provinces. And the name Sarah literally means princess. That's why in modern Hebrew, a minister in the government is called a sar. Or in ancient time, a prince is called a sar. And a princess is called Sarah. So here, because Sarah lived for 127 years and became the mother of all Jews, and since God told Avram and Sarah that all the nations of the world would be blessed through them, so on that merit, Esther becomes queen over 127 provinces. Okay, so that's our first insight for the night. The second one is there's a statement in the Zohar explaining what is the place where Sarah is buried called Kiryat Arba. Now, we already gave a reason. The reason is that there were 4 pairs that were buried there. Rashi actually brings another explanation that there were 4 giants who lived at that time in Hebron. And they were very, very famous and well-known giants. So it was called Kiryat Arba, the city of the 4 giants. The Zohar offers another explanation. And because the parsha is talking about death, without going into it, there's much that we learn about our customs, our traditions, and our laws about burial and mourning from this incident. That will have to be for a different time. But here we're talking about death. Sarah is the first Jew to die. And so the Torah goes into great detail about the physical burial, but also the spiritual meaning of all of these customs and death itself. So the Zohar says Kiryat Arba represents the 4 elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And that with death, there's a separation of these elements. In other words, as long as we're in the world, soul and body, but at death, soul and body separate. But the Zohar is saying, but also the physical elements return to the earth. And this is the importance, and again, this is like the headquarters of learning much about burial. This is without any cultural or religious judgments, but we believe in burial in the ground. We don't believe in cremation. Again, this is other people do other things and they have their reasons for it. I'm not questioning that. But in Jewish tradition, because in the story of the creation of humankind, so it says that God formed man from the dust of the earth and blew into his nostrils the soul of life. And so here, again, we see this name Adam, where God blowing into the nostrils of a human being, the soul of life, that's the Aleph of Adam. And the dust of the earth represents the body, the dam, the blood. And so in a different verse in the Torah and later in Kohelet, it says that we come from the dust of the earth and we return to the dust of the earth. That's the source of why we bury in the ground. Now, in Eretz Israel, in outside of Israel, so people are buried in a casket. In Israel, people are buried in the ground itself. And so, and this is considered a great merit. And in fact, outside of Israel, when a Jew is buried, even if they're buried in a casket, because that's the law of the land, they put a little bit of dirt from Eretz Yisrael on the person as they're being buried. So this idea, from dust you come and to dust you return. So I want to go into this a little bit deeper. So first of all, there's different words for earth and the dust of the earth and the soil. One of them, of course, is Adama. Now, Adama is the same as the name Adam, but it has a hey at the end. Adam, Adama. So this also is an intrinsic, essential connection between the human being and the earth. And this is especially true in Eretz Yisrael. Our connection to Eretz Yisrael is an essential, intrinsic connection. So here we have Adam and Adama. But the word in Hebrew for the dust of the earth, that's the word that's used when God is creating man from the afar. Ayin Pei Resh, afar. And this is one of the secrets in last week's Parsha, when Abraham is, call it, negotiating with God about the city of Sodom. So he approaches God both in a very, very strong stance and a very humble stance at the same time. And one of the things he says is, V'anochi afar ve'efer. I am merely dust and ashes. And so here, Abraham was expressing this knowledge, this wisdom of understanding that we come from the afar and we will return to the afar. In other words, we understand the eternity of the soul. It's one of the things that we learn about the burial of Sarah, because the parsha is called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. And so it's paradoxical, because in the opening verse, her death is explained in relationship to her life. Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah. And Shnei can also be read as two, the two lives of Sarah. What are the two lives? One in this world and one in the world to come. This is one of the sources of understanding the eternity of the soul. But the body is not eternal. And yet we give it honor because it once housed a soul. And so therefore we give it honor by burying it in the ground. We return it to its source. So the Gemara says an amazing thing. It says everything comes from afar. Even the sun comes from afar. So what does that mean? Dust. So in the famous 1960 song, we are stardust, we are golden, we have to get ourselves back to the garden. So this term, we are stardust. So it's very poetic. It's very, very beautiful. But there's a reality to it, because we're told that everything in the universe, all of the elements that allow life to exist on this planet and allows galaxies to form and all of that came from, originally there were only a handful of elements, but when stars began to form, and eventually they died, we use the expression they died, and they exploded, and they spewed the elements that created the universe, including human beings and life on this planet. And so the expression, we are stardust, has actually a very firm scientific idea behind it. But we see that the sages already understood that. So we'll go one step further, and that is, but what does it mean that God took from the dust of the earth and created man? Does it mean literally God took from the dust of the earth and kind of like made a Pinocchio and then blew into Pinocchio a soul of life? So on a deeper level, we have to go back to the first verse of the Torah. And we're told, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we're told that the earth in the first verse doesn't mean our earth. It means all physical reality that would ever be created. And all physical reality comes from matter. And that's why the Ramban says, well, what exactly, when it says in the beginning God created, what was the first thing to be created? Here we're told heaven and earth, but what came before that? And the Ramban says time and space, time and matter. And it took someone like Einstein to explain the connection between time and matter. So when we look at the first verse, the earth there means all created matter comes from the first day. In modern terms, it came from the Big Bang. All physical matter that exists in the tens of billions of galaxies, each one with tens of billions of stars, all came from a primordial expansion, the Big Bang. But in Kabbalah, way before it, there were ideas that are very, very similar and parallel and precede the idea of the Big Bang. But the idea is all the matter that would ever be in existence came from that initial bang. And here we're saying that all the physical matter that would ever come into being was created in the earth. That's what the earth represents. And the Shemayim represents all the spiritual worlds, soul, consciousness, all the different spiritual worlds that would ever be created. We know about the physical universe, but we know from Kabbalah, and now at least it's proposed, the idea of string theory, where there are many dimensions. We've known this for years. We talk about angels all the time. Angels are in a different dimension, a different world, but they're all happening simultaneously, and they can be accessed. And so that's the afar. And the Gemara says everything comes from afar, even the sun. We're talking about matter. So when it says that God took from the dust of the earth, it means that a human being, going back to the name Adam, is a composite of physical matter, a body, and a soul. So this also helps us understand a very deep thing, is that on the third day of creation, vegetation is created. And then we're told that in the second retelling of the story, so it says that nothing had grown because there was no person to work the land. And then it says a mist rose from the earth and it created precipitation and everything began to grow. So Rashi explained what's going on here. Wasn't everything created on the third day? Why are we told that until the sixth day nothing had grown? So he explains that vegetation was created on the third day, but it as it were, it was still in potential. It was beneath the ground, and there was no person who put it together that without rain nothing can grow. And so Adam prayed for rain, and a mist came and watered everything, and everything began to grow. So if you go back to the third day of creation, it doesn't use the word create with vegetation. And in fact, the word create is only used in 3 instances. The first one is in the first verse of the Torah. Bereshit bara. That's the word for create, bara. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The second time is in the 5th day of creation, where God creates the first living beings, especially the great sea creatures. And there the word bara is used. These are the first living creations of animal creations. And then in the creation of man, the word bara is used 3 different times. Like what we say, chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. 3 different times the word bara is used. And so the Rav Ginsburg explains, why isn't the word bara used with vegetation? Vegetation is alive. It's also alive. It's not like an animal, it's not like a human, but it is alive. And so it's explained that the power of growth in the vegetable kingdom is intrinsically connected to the power of growth in the earth. It's the earth that has the power of growth. And part of the earth is also water. In other words, without water and earth, things don't grow. Now, obviously, vegetation has within their DNA makeup the ability to grow. But that growth was not considered a new creation. It's part of the earth, which was created on the first day. And that's why it waited for a human being, where the word bara is used 3 different times, until it could actually be fruitful and rise above the potential of just being in the earth. So this is a very, very deep concept about our connection to the earth. Again, Adam and Adama, that everything comes from afar. And so Rav Ginsburg has a book called The Breath of, I believe, The Breath of Life. It's about evolution, understanding evolution from a Torah perspective. And he says that one of the main proposals of evolution is that we all come from a common ancestor. And the Torah does not agree with this. And we're told we all come from probably a bacteria. And all living things came from a common ancestor, and everything branched off through mutations and the survival of the fittest into all the different creations that we have. So Rav Ginsburg says an amazing thing. He says, this we don't hold by, because we don't hold that human beings come from monkeys, and monkeys come from a horse, and a horse comes from a dog, and a dog comes from a fish, and a fish comes from an amoeba comes from a bacteria. And that's how everything developed. And the fossil record does not show that. It's still, in a sense, a proposal of evolution that someday we will see it in the fossil record. So Rav Ginsburg says, but we do have an idea that everything has a common ancestor, and that is afar. It's the dust of the earth is the common denominator, the common ancestor of all matter. All matter is coming from the afar, as the sages said. So it's a very interesting, needs a lot of thought, and it explains, again, our burial and mourning practices of burial in the earth. And it explains why people are so connected to trees and mountains and rivers and waterfalls and all of nature. And especially explains our connection to the land of Israel. It's an intrinsic, essential connection. It's in our DNA. We literally come from the Afar Haaretz. And I'll just end that one of the Midrashim say that when God created Adam, he took from the Afar, from the four corners of the world, and brought it to the Temple Mount. And that is where God created Adam. He brought the Afar from the whole world to the Temple Mount. And that's why, in reverse, the energy that emanates from the Temple Mount goes to the whole world. It's because in the beginning, it was like all brought there, and now it's radiating out. That's why Yerushalayim is Ir HaKodesh, the holy city. Okay, we have time for one last quick insight, is without going deep into the story, we see that after the burial of Sarah, so the good part of the Parsha talks about how Eliezer, the servant of Avram, goes and finds a wife for Yitzchak. How he finds Rivka. Tremendous detail is given in the story. It really emphasizes the importance of the family, of the family structure, of soulmates getting together. That we will have to save for a different time. But I just want to talk about the idea that Eliezer finds Rivka at the well. And we see that there are three different couples who meet at the well. So Eliezer, Yitzchak didn't meet Rivka there, but Eliezer went and set up a sign how he would know who the appropriate person for Yitzchak would be. And so he met at the well. The other story is Yaakov meets Rachel at the well, and Moshe meets Zippora at the well. So all of these stories have something in common and differences. They're not exactly the same. Each has its own circumstances, its own meanings. But one of the things that is common to all three is the idea of chesed. The test that Eliezer set up is, if I ask a young woman if she will give me water, and she answers and says, not only will I give you water, but I will get water for your camels also. That's the test that Eliezer set up. Here comes Rivka. He approaches Rivka. He says, can I have some water? Now, water is such a important commodity. She could have said, yeah, that will be $2 a bottle. But she didn't. She gave him water immediately, and she offered to give water. And it's pointed out, do you know how much work it is to give water to 10 camels? Anyways, so we see that really the test was that whoever is going to be the right person for Yitzchak has to be full of chesed. They're going to be in the family of Avram. Avram is the archetypal of chesed. So that was the test. And of course, Rivka passed it with flying colors. She was full of chesed. With Yaakov and Rachel, he comes to the well and he notices that there's this huge rock over the well. And he says, why is there such a big rock here? And he says, well, we protect the water, and only when all of the shepherds come do we have enough strength to move it. And that way we protect the purity of the water. And so they explain that to Yaakov, and then all of a sudden Rachel comes and he sees her and he is inspired to do an act of chesed. So he by himself moves the rock. So in these circumstances, it was an act of chesed. When Moshe comes to the well, so he comes there and the shepherds are pushing around Zippora and her sisters. They're abusing them. And so Moshe saves them, and then he gives them water. So in all cases, there is a common idea of water. And we've learned, especially for those who come on Tuesdays, we've been learning for, I think, 10 sessions now about the spiritual nature of water. And we say, Ein mayim ela Torah. There's no water other than Torah. And one of the ways that we refer to Torah is Torah Chesed, a Torah of loving kindness. And so here we see that all three cases, soulmates are brought together at the well, at the water, and the water is representing Torah, but especially the Torah of Chesed, of loving kindness. Another thing that is connecting them is the idea of prophecy. When Eliezer I'll say prophecy and what's called Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. Eliezer comes to the well, and he does something very unusual. He sets up this test. He says, God, I'm setting up this test, and like I want you to come through to me. I want you to show me who the right person is. And this is the test that I'm setting up. But here we see what's called like a bit of Ruach HaKodesh, that he set up the test almost prophetically, that Rivka would be the one to pass it. And then we see that Rivka, she herself is considered one of the 7 female prophetesses in the Bible, in the Tanakh. And she is considered a prophetess. So the whole incident has the sense, has the taste of divine inspiration. When Yaakov meets Rachel at the well, so we're told that when he goes over to her, it says that he kissed her and he cried. And Rashi says, why did he cry? He says that he had Ruach HaKodesh, that they would not be buried together. In other words, he saw their whole life like flash in front of him in a prophetic state. And he saw that they wouldn't be buried together. And he cried. So here we see at the well, Yaakov is having a state of prophecy and divine inspiration. And Moshe, here we don't see it explicitly, but Moshe ends up marrying Zippora, and he becomes the greatest of all of the prophets. And his whole life is connected to water. Actually, we had virtually an entire class in our series, The Spiritual Nature of Water, showing throughout Moshe's life all the different connections he had with water, and all the different connections, of course, with Torah. And so here we see a commonality in these 2 ideas of chesed and divine inspiration. And they're both all connected to Torah, because water is always like a parable, an allegory for Torah itself. And so Torah is called the Torah of loving kindness, Torah chesed. It's in the Amida every day. The last bracha, we call the Torah of chesed. And what I'll end with this, what's called a numerical gem, this is from Rav Ginsburg. So he explains that the word Kabbalah equals 137. And he says that the essence of Kabbalah is a unity of wisdom and prophecy, Chachma and Nevuah. Chachma equals 73, and Nevuah equals 64. 73 and 64 equals 137 equals Kabbalah. So he was explaining that Kabbalah, the Chachma part, is the intellect. Many people don't realize that Kabbalah is very logical, very intellectual, very actually reasonable. But at the same time, it has a taste of divine inspiration to it. And so that's what Kabbalah is. It's a unity of Chachma and Nevuah. And so here, Kabbalah is the inner dimension of Torah. And so here we see at the well, we see this unity of a Torah of Chesed and a Torah of Nevuah. So we should all be blessed that our learning of Torah, and like we said in the beginning, our Torah tonight and our discussion afterwards, it should all be a healing and a protection for all of Am Yisrael, wherever we are. And all of our soldiers should come home safe. All of the hostages should come home safe. Everyone in the hospital should come home safe and healed, and all the broken hearts should be healed.